Hello everyone, we have another short video here for chapter number 6, and it's problem number 13 down on the bottom of page 295. Alright, and what it does, it says arrange the departments so they satisfy the conditions shown in the following rating grid, basically the MAR diagram, into a 3x3 format. Place department number 5 in the lower left hand corner of the 3x3 grid. So what I need to end up with is a 3x3 grid that meets the necessary conditions with department number 5 in the lower left hand corner. Right? That is basically going to help me to make sure that I might have multiple grids that would satisfy the requirements, but having department 5 in the lower left hand corner will limit the number of possibilities that it can have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with looking at each department, and I'm going to do the A's. So I should set up a table that sets up my A links, because those are required on here. Those are basically required items to be next to one another. X links, which are items that should not be next to one another. E items, which are items that are highly important to be next to one another, and I links, which are somewhat important to be next to one another. Now, what we don't have on this one is we don't have O's, which are of less importance, and U's, which are basically not important to be next to one another, but they don't need to be far away from one another either. So what we've listed first is the A's and the X's, which are the most important ones. A's must be next to one another, and X's cannot be next to one another. So looking at department number 1, all right, looking down the diagonal from department number 1, it needs to be next to department number 3, it needs to be next to department number 6, and it needs to be next to department number 8, right? So I have 1 next to 3, 1 next to 7, and 1 next to 8. Looking at the next diagonal, which is department number 2, it has 3 A's, and they are departments number 5, 6, and 7. So department number 2 needs to be next to 5, 6, and 7. Looking at department 3, I have only 1 A link, and that goes with department number 9. So 3 next to 9. Looking at department number 4, I have 2 A links. It needs to be next to number 6 and number 7. So 4 next to 6 and next to 7. Department number 5, I have 2 A links. It needs to be next to department number 7 and department number 9. So 5 next to 7 and 5 next to 9. Department number 6, I don't have any A links. Department number 7, I have 2 A links. It needs to be next to departments number 8 and number 9. Right? Now I look at my X links, and what I should do is count them, and if I count my green screens, I have 13 green diamonds in the MAR diagram, and I have 13 lines in my table over here. So that's good. I haven't missed any. Doesn't mean I didn't make any errors. It just means I didn't miss anything. Right, now I'm going to do my X's. For department number 1, it cannot be next to department number 2, and it cannot be next to department number 6. Those are the only 2 X's that correspond with the diagonal line that corresponds with department number 1. Department number 2, I have 2 X's, and sorry, I have 1 X. I have 1 X. For department number 2, it cannot be next to department number 3. For department number 3, I have 1, 2, 3 X's, right? And those correspond with departments 4, 6, and 8. Right, so 4, 6, and 8, it cannot be next to department number 3. For department number 4, I have 2 X's, and they correspond to department number 5 and department number 9. So 4 cannot be next to either 5 or 9. For department number 5, I have 2 X's. It cannot be next to 6 or 8. So 5 cannot be next to 6 or 8. For department number 6, I have 1 X. It cannot be next to department number 9. And for department number 8, I have 1 X, and department number 8 cannot be next to department number 9. And I'm sorry, I misled you. I told you there were no U's, but there are some U's in here that are unimportant, and those are basically, we're not showing those at all. The only one that's missing is the O's, which are less important items. So E-links. E-links is going to be the next one. And again, what I should do is I should count back and make sure I have enough X's. And if I count the X's in the grid, the X's are not shaded, but they're in red. I have 12 X's, and I have 12 lines corresponding to the X's. So for the E's, I have I have two E's. Those are in yellow, corresponding with department number 1. They're with department number 4 and department number 9. For department number 2, I have one E, and that corresponds with department number 9. For department number 3, I have one E, and that corresponds with department number 7. For department number 7 here. Department number 4, I have one E, and that corresponds to department number 8. So 4 and 8, we'd like that to be next to one another. It's important, but not critically important. And finally, number 6 is the only other one that has an E, and number 6 and number 7 should be close to one another. A less important but somewhat important link, the only one that I have, the only I that I have, corresponds with departments number 2, the line number 2, and that corresponds with an intersection with diagonal upwards for number 4. So now I've identified my most important links, and what I notice here is we can see that department number 7 appears most frequently, followed by departments 1, 2, 5, and 9, and then departments 3, 4, 6, and 8. Department 7 is a good candidate for a central location because it has so many links, so many departments that are critically linked to it, right? Then we satisfy the remaining A conditions with the X conditions. After that, we can use trial and error, which is important to understand that there's no scientific method on this basically to do this. It's trial and error. Computer programs might help you out a little bit on that, right? So I'm going to move my diagram up here a little bit. Again, remember that I have a 3 by 3 matrix that's required, right? And 5 must be in the lower left-hand corner. Remember the A links. A links are 1 to 3, so 1 to 3 next to one another. Yes. 1 to 7. 1 to 7 close to one another. Yes. 1 to 8. 1 to 8 close to one another. Yes. 2 to 5 close to one another. 2 to 5 close to one another. Yes. 2 to 6 and 2 to 7. 2 to 6 and 2 to 7 close to one another. Yes. 3 to 9. 3 to 9 close to one another. Yes. 4 to 6 and 4 to 7. Right? So 4 to 6 and 4 to 7 close to one another. Yes. 5 to 7 and 5 to 9. Right? 5 to 7 is a diagonal over here, but close to one another. And 5 to 9 right over here. So those are close to one another as well. 7 to 8 and 7 to 9. Right? 7 to 8, diagonal right next to one another. And 7 to 9 right next to one another laterally. Right? Items that can't be next to one another. 1 to 2. So 1 and 2, they're not adjacent, they don't touch. 1 and 6. 1 and 6 are not adjacent, they don't touch. 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are not adjacent, they don't touch. 3 to 4, they're not adjacent, they don't touch. 3 to 6, 3 and 6, they're not adjacent, they don't touch. 3 to 8, again, not adjacent, they don't touch. 4 to 5, 4 to 5, they're not adjacent, they don't touch, not even diagonally. Right? 4 to 9, 4 and 9, not adjacent, they don't touch. 5 to 6, 5 and 6, they're not adjacent, they don't touch. 5 to 8, not adjacent, they don't touch. 6 to 9, they're not adjacent, they don't touch. 8 to 9, 8 to 9, they're not adjacent, they don't touch. So we've met basically all the conditions here. Now important, lesser important, but still important, 1 to 4, they're pretty close to one another. They touch diagonally. 1 to 9, they touch diagonally. 2 to 9, they touch diagonally. 3 to 7, they touch diagonally. 4 to 8, they touch diagonally. 6 to 7, 6 and 7, they touch diagonally. Eye length, somewhat important, but not really highly important. 2 to 4, 2 and 4, they touch diagonally. So we've basically met all the conditions of highly important, very important, and items that should not touch, X links, Do not touch one another whatsoever. All right. Hopefully this was somewhat helpful to you. This was a little bit shorter than the other one. So have a great week, everyone.